Welcome to Chicago Jewish Cafe. Today, our uh, guest is David Jagger, who is an arts and culture writer. He is an award winning journalist based in Manhattan. He received his PhD from the University of Toronto. And what made me ask him to drop by Chicago Jewish Cafe was his article at the Tablet magazine. And I'm just going to cite from the article a little thing, and you'll understand what I'm talking about. Um, in the article, David writes David J. Garrow maintained in his biography of Barack Obama, that fault lines emerged in their relationship, that is, relationship of Obama with the sister of David Jagger, when they attended an exhibit about the trial of Adolf Eichmann at the Chicago's Spertus College. Specifically, and according to her statement to Garrow, Sheila, that is our guest's sister, was irked by Obama's failure to condemn the outrageous anti Semitic remarks of a Chicago mayoral aide named Steve Cockley, who is no longer alive today, who had maintained, among other things, that Jewish doctors had deliberately infected African American babies with AIDS in an attempt at genocide. And he continues writing, according to my source, my sister was overjoyed by the news which marked a major turn toward Obama's political future. That's fantastic, she said. What am I going to wear? At which point Obama, in a moment of unguarded candor, leveled his eyes at her and said, I can't take you. So, according to David, that was the turning point in the relationship between his sister and Barack Obama. David,
The apocryphal turning point.
apocryphal.
The
So,
Yeah.
so now, what does it mean? What does that turning point mean, and what does it tell us about Obama and Democratic Party? The way I see, he is now the boss of the Democratic Party.
There has there's been some speculation to that effect that it is Obama's party, the current shadow president, which is another discussion. I'm not sure if it speaks so much to Obama as a person as it does to the political climate of that particular moment in history, and just also the nature of racial politics in the United States in general, which operates very, very much along a binary and has always operated along a binary. And writing the piece at Tablet is actually always a wonderful process because I have such great editors there, David Samuels and Alana Newhouse, and sometimes they will add context and nuance. And one thing that Samuels actually added was this newfound enthusiasm for the one drop rule, right? And the one drop rule is, of course, one of the most odious sort of, it's one of the most shameful things enacted into law sometime around the Civil War era, which has said that if you had a single drop of Negro blood, that made you a Negro, right? According to the parlance of the times. So if you are even fraction Black, you are therefore Black. And so I see Obama, hybrid that he is. He has a European mother, he has a Kenyan father, he has a stepfather in Indonesia, but he's caught in a very, very old American political binary, which simply says Black is Black and white is white. And for whatever unfortunate reason, this has persisted. And one of the things I wanted to address in my article, both from my personal point of view, I don't want to speak for my sister, but hybridity is the one thing that never gets discussed. It does get discussed for people of color, right? And I've seen many lively, I mean, I live in New York. It's an incredibly ethnically diverse city. And I also worked I was a high school music teacher for many years in a very high needs Caribbean neighborhood. And there are always nuances, but the nuances get discussed among people of color, right? And there is colorism. Colorism does exist. There are uh, sort of levels of what people consider to be, authentic blackness, not so authentic blackness. I was very surprised once I was teaching a kid who, to me, appeared very black, right? He was light skinned, but he just appeared like a completely racially, culturally black person. And he said to me, he's like, the other kids don't think I'm black here, sir. And I
Meaning
said, what do you mean? He's like,
other black kids.
the other black kids don't think I'm black, sir. I said, what do you mean? He says, they think I'm Chinese. And it's because he's from Trinidad, and people from Trinidad are intermixed with Chinese, just as Hawaiians, the Polynesian and Hawaiian natives are also thoroughly intermarried. So I've always been interested in this moment, and that apocryphal moment. It may have happened, it may not, or it could have happened differently. But I think it was very interesting that at a certain point, because they were very serious, they were
But why
as
did you
far as I
begin
could.
why did you begin this article starting with this story? And what did you want to say in this article about Obama
In
and
this article,
political culture today in America?
in this article, I wanted to say that hybridity still needs to be discussed. It is an integral part of our racial conversation. There are millions of people in the United States who identify as hybrid, and there's no
When you say
political voice
hybrid,
for
I'm
them.
sorry, David. When you say hybrid, you mean children of mothers of different races or ethnicities?
Multiracial. Let us say
Multi.
multiracial,
Okay.
right?
Uh,
Not necessarily identifying as any, and it's not even a cultural thing, because I cannot say culturally that I'm Japanese in any way. My mother left Japan when she was very young, and she had no real desire to pass the culture on to us for her own reasons, right? I mean, I did absorb Japanese culture, but as a Zen student, and Zen Buddhism is just sort
do
of
you
a
speak Japanese?
no.
No.
I do not. I'm learning. I'm finally learning, right? So there's all of these contentions and issues, right? And so yeah, I wanted to address hybridity in the article, and I wanted to address this rather sad moment um, where the binary had to rear its ugly head. And I'm
Yes,
not blaming Obama at all.
this is what I want us to talk about, because we could talk about the what you call hybridity. I don't like
Right?
the word. I mean
Okay. Multiracial. Yeah.
multiracial. For me is more preferable. And I understand. I'm sure that many of our listeners understand this element very well, but
Mm,
I still would like us to move from the personal identity of a person like Barack Obama with its impact on the politics and policies of Democratic Party and of certain
mm,
element within American society. Because for me as a Jew, uh, what's going on now in America uh, does not smell good.
it that's a very mild way of addressing the absolutely horrific resurgence. of anti-Semitism. It's close to Kristallnacht almost.
But it's not simply
Uh,
resurgence of anti-Semitism, although this is a major, major, major problem. But the
yeah.
quality of this resurgence, the level, the segment of American society. Take a look at what's going on now in Chicago. I mean, they've talked about, I mean, they like Jews, supposedly, things like that. They did not mention Israel once. Israel is a pariah,
Mm.
not only, for Ireland somewhere or somewhere, but for Democratic Party in the United States. It's a pariah. They cannot bring themselves to mention word Israel. I was born in the Soviet Union, and in the Soviet Union,
Mm.
you know, saying a Jew in newspaper was absolutely verboten, prohibited. I mean, sometimes when you mention something that everybody recognizes it as a Jew, you know, uh, indirectly somehow, by adding, patronymic that is Jewish, but not saying a Jew. In the Soviet Union, the Israel was no good, racist, imperialist, apartheid, whatever you want to call it,
Mm.
Nazi
Mm.
collaborator, as it is now in the United States, in many of those. And Obama, and I do not know if she's going to be speaking, if she's going to mention, I doubt she's going to mention Israel other than desire for peace.
Right, right, right. Um,
And the reason
yeah.
for me was your article was interesting because I do connect very much in politics personal biographies of various people, that take part in politics. Because I said I am a Jew, until a
Mm.
certain point, I did not even know what Jewish meant, but my father and mother were Jewish, so that was it, And then, and that affected the way I saw the world, the way I related to the world, the way I treated other people, and the way I felt other people treated me. But here in the United States now, and you went through the same thing, just from different
Mm.
starting point and different things. But in the United States today, we see the Democratic Party, and probably, I do not know, probably Kamala Harris is going to be next president of the United States. I'm not sure. There's few states, whatever it is. Who know? Who knows?
Who knows? I mean, it has been such a wild roller coaster of a political season. So, you know, it's anybody's race at this particular point. But yes, she does seem to have like, leapt out of the starting gate. How much of that is her being aided and abetted by the embedded sort of, the legacy media and
And
uh,
David, on a personal
the,
level,
the 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 Democratic Party machine,
on a personal
Um,
level, on a personal
yes.
level, looking at her as individual,
Mm.
I'm sorry to say, but I really like her much better than Donald Trump. I'm sorry, you know. I like her father.
Mm.
Indian father. I like her Indian mother. I
Mm.
like what they taught her. I like
Yeah.
many things that she learned from them and the personality and everything else. What I don't like is the fact that she is leaning toward the people that attack Israel without naming them as aggressors. And that
Well,
bothers
yeah.
me.
The Democratic Party is trying to have it both ways at this particular point. They're trying to have it both ways. Um, Obviously, they've never liked Netanyahu. Obama never liked Netanyahu. And I have several very staunchly pro-Israel Jewish friends who don't like Netanyahu but see him as necessary. So that's its own contentious conversation. Yeah, they would like to have, and the Democratic Party has always had the broad support of Jews. Jews tend to skew democratic and liberal, right? Because the whole foundation of the Jewish faith is liberation, freedom from slavery, suffrage for everyone. Those are the founding spiritual Jewish principles, right? People say, can you summarize Judaism? I say Jews hate slavery. They don't like slaves. They don't like being slaves. They don't like people who enslave other people. I have a friend who's an actual African Jew who runs a gallery. Uh, Lovely man, Gabriel Colongo, and he said the Jews are the only people in history that came down to the Congo or came down to Africa to liberate slaves, not to enslave people, but to liberate them.
Well,
And he traveled.
I
Yeah.
wouldn't go that far. I mean, we had
Okay.
Jews had periods when we were slave owners and abusers
Yeah.
of
Sure.
slaves and all kinds of things.
Every culture has a legacy of colonialism, of war crime, of aggression. We're human, obviously,
But on
but
the
I
other
think
hand, the
that
idea
yeah,
of liberation from slavery and
yeah,
the idea of um, uh, the entire humanity coming from one mother and father, that we,
mm,
regardless of color of skin, we're all one. It is a Jewish idea. Without it, there's no other people, there's no other sources for ideas like that.
yeah. And one thing also, for if we're going to continue, the incredible amount of ignorance, especially the people who want to refer to Israel as an apartheid state, the incredible ignorance of the ethnic diversity of Israel, right? Most people, I guess, here and are familiar with Ashkenazi Jews, Jews from Europe, who became European mostly through forced migration and forced intermarriage. But then you have Mizrahi Jews, and you have Arab Jews, and you have the Beta Israel from Ethiopia. There's a funny post on Instagram where an Ethiopian Jewess asked her mom, "What's the most surprising thing about Israel?" And she said, "I had no idea there were so many white Jews." Right. This is an Ethiopian woman who had been raised entirely in the Jewish Ethiopian community.
And we're being apartheid, people, racist people. And let me put it this
Yeah.
way: a black
Mm.
guy from Africa can become a Jew and join the people.
Right. And what I really like actually,
David, I do not mean only
mm,
religiously. I'm talking about when you join the Jews, when you become a convert, you become
mm.
part of the Jewish people, regardless of the color of your skin.
Moses' second wife, I believe, was Beta Israel. She was either
Well, we
Ethiopian
do
or,
not
or
know
she
if
was
she was second or first because, Tzipora,
right,
according to Jewish tradition,
right,
Tzipora was Kushit Isha, that is black woman,
right,
and we do not know. Some people say that she was from Ethiopian because that's ancient translators did in Greek Ethiopian, but Ethiopian at that time did not mean from Ethiopia. It meant just black color skin. And we
right.
know that in northern Arabia, many Arab tribes had black color of skin, and
Yeah.
Midian, from which Sipora was one,
Mm.
might have been, white and black, like in many other people, and she ended up being black, according to Miriam, the daughter of Moses. But
Yeah. So Moses' sons were multiracial.
absolutely.
We know this, and they served at the temple. They were, they were not discriminated against in any way, and they are part of the lineage, or part of the lineage of the father of Judaism. There's a wonderful, as unfortunate as the last year and a half has been in terms of the ugliness that has brought out, it has also brought out really, really interesting Arab Jewish voices, and also even like Arab Jewish allies. So there is a young man here, Abraham Hamra, who's a Syrian Jew, and he actually goes to, like, he would sort of crash the protests outside of New York University, where you have a lot of these left-leaning white professors that are calling Israel an apartheid state. And he looks 100% Arab, and he gets in their faces and calls them white supremacists and says, "I am a Syrian Jew. My family was forced to leave Syria. You have no idea what you're talking about. He's very vocal, but I did not really see a lot of presence of Arab Jews or Mizrahi Jews until recently, and I think it's wonderful. There's another person I should mention is Elika Labad, who I believe is Iranian Muslim, but she has really, really wonderful, nuanced sort of views on Israel from an Arab perspective. Right. I mean, how Israel is essential to the peace of the region, right? So, yeah, yeah, Israel is obviously a multiracial state.
And that
Um,
is the state that is called racist and
yeah,
apartheid and whatever else, only because it's a Jewish state. I mean,
only exactly,
the
and the Democratic Party does not want to lose. I mean, let's look at the squad, and let's look at the, you know, just as my sister surmised in Chicago politics so many years ago, there's a lot of very rancid anti-Semitism that comes out of an extreme sort of left-wing community activist wing of the Democratic Party, and you see that you see that in Rashida Tlaib, and you see it in Ilhan Omar. You know,
Well, the leftist anti-Semitism is the subject all of its own. I mean, it has long, long,
yeah,
ancient roots. But let's talk about the impact of Obama and the new Democratic Party, because the party that no longer speaks about Israel. And I believe that when Kamala Harris will become president of the United States, uh,
mm,
there's going to be a lot of problems for Israel and for us Jews. A lot of problems. Now,
yeah.
you may have a different opinion, but you know personally Barack Obama,
I
and
to say that I know him personally, I mean, I knew him off and on as the kid brother of my sister, from whom I'm estranged, by the way. We don't speak. I think that whole chapter of her life was very traumatic for her in a lot of ways. And I mean, I knew him, you know, as a 19-year-old kid and the late 80s. You know, I did visit. We did spend quite a bit of time. I mean, I got a sense of his personality. This was also before any type of political ambition really showed itself. He wanted to be a writer. His number one ambition was to join the Iowa Writers Workshop, and that's what he came across as, a very cosmopolitan, cultured individual who just loved literature, right? Because I mean, also at that point, you know, I wanted to be a poet. I was
but
into
let's talk
literature.
about the impact of his background on the politics. I mean, you mentioned in your article that he did not
Yeah.
talk a lot about race. He did not talk about different things,
Nope.
and some things that he did were very unpleasant, to say the least, with
Mm.
regard to Jews in Israel, but not
Yeah.
openly. But today, you know, this silence about Israel really, really bothers me. You know, silence in Democratic Party about Israel. If they talk about anything, they don't talk about Israel. Nobody comes out there and says, we are allies of Israel, you know, we stand with Israel to the end, like they normally used to say all the time.
Biden said so. Biden said it, right? He said it out loud,
But not
unequivocally.
not
I mean,
not
he
not
would retreat,
not,
but the
not
party
in
has
the
moved
last
on now.
not in the last 2 days. Not in Chicago.
No,
He did not
not in
say anything.
Chicago.
He just
Well,
said
it's
he
no
wants
longer
peace.
his, right? And that's such a nebulous term. If you've noticed, the whole protest movement has now suddenly, the talking points have changed. I don't know where their talking points are coming from. You know, maybe the Philadelphia corridor, but now they're no longer talking about a ceasefire. Right now they're suddenly saying peace. That has become the new buzzword, which is such a nebulous word. Could mean anything,
If they
right?
really, if
Um,
all of those supporters of this thing, if they all wanted peace, they could have say Hamas
return
leave
the
that. lay,
Hostages.
lay down your arms, release hostages, and no more death. It's just that
Yeah,
simple.
that's simple. Right. Yeah, quit firing rockets.
Mhm.
It's you know, it's a maddening situation. I'm not in any way minimizing Palestinian grievance, although I have my own nuanced uh, opinions about what that consists of. I have Palestinian friends. I have a friend who actually lives in the West Bank. So, and here's the other thing that people don't understand about Israel is that it's not just that it's multiracial. The diversity of opinion is also all over the map, and also this notion that there is a Jewish agenda. That
Well,
somehow
there is
there
a
is a group
Jewish
of
agenda, but I want them to answer what is this Jewish agenda. I mean, this.
right, but I'm talking about the very specious anti-Semitic ideas that there's a secret group of Jews running things. In fact, David Samuels interviewed a Davis professor. I can't remember his name. It should not be remembered, but an open anti-Semite, and he said, "You really think Jews get together behind closed doors and plan things? Have you ever sat in a room with Jews? Have you ever seen them agree on anything? Right?" So there's that notion as well, right? That these kind of forced stereotypes, about what Israel is and about what it represents. And in the case of Obama, I think, and in the case of the current Democratic Party, they're trying to have it both ways. They don't necessarily want to lose the J Streeters. They don't want to lose the solidly um, middle class to upper middle class to wealthy, Jewish Democratic donors, but they're losing them, right? We can see that happening with the reactions on campus. Um, but they also want to play to the radical left base, right? And there is, as we could see with what I call the tentifada, right? The tents on campus. Um, there's just a huge amount of pro-terrorism, anti-Semitic, anti-Israel sentiment, and they're afraid of it. And it's right at the gates of the Chicago Convention, as we can see.
What do you think? I mean, you call Kamala chameleon, a racial chameleon.
I don't necessarily. I mean, I say that. I mean, every politician is a chameleon by necessity, right? I take more of a tragic view of it, right? I mean, Hunter S. Thompson is already saying like fear and loathing in the campaign trail. He's already talking about how utterly um, staged and streamlined and controlled every political pit stop is,
Mhm.
right? Like just everything, from like hair to like the clothing they're wearing to, did you see the strange Tim Waltz? Like I guess the new buzzword for the Kamala campaign now is joy, right? So Tim Waltz comes out and does this ridiculous kind of, hyper, oh, I'm with it, embarrassing, frankly. But so it's always that. It's very much, and of course, the Democratic Party is very strongly allied with, PR and with Hollywood, and so it's a machine, right? And it strives to sort of portray a message, and it wants to quell dissent. But I honestly think that this is not going to go well for the Democratic Party. I think that there is an unhinged um, radical element, an Israel hating element that is haunting it currently.
And to me, this hate of Israel or hate of Jews, which
Right.
masks itself as a hate of Zionism, hate of Israel. For me, the way I see it, this is a glue that brings all of those elements of this new Democratic Party together. Black,
Right.
Muslim, I do not know if Hispanics, because the anti-Semitism among Hispanics also much higher than in the society on the whole, on the average, and the leftist, I'm talking about white, specifically Jewish leftists. Um, uh, I do not want to call them morons because that would be a compliment. Uh, the they also joined the
I would rather say willful ignorance. I would rather say willful ignorance. And honestly, I mean, and it exists on both sides, right? I mean, witness the spectacular meltdown of Candace Owens, right? Which people
this
are
is
sort of reeling at.
this is unbelievable, just
Yeah, it's totally.
absolutely
But
unbelievable.
part of me is actually thinking, somebody was saying, well, she was let go by by Ben Shapiro. She was let go by the Daily Wire, and that this is her very cynical move. She knows that she can't move back into the mainstream, so she's just very cynically
Well,
sort of moving to
she
the
was
extreme
let go
right.
already when Shapiro saw that she's an anti-Semite. I mean, that was
Yeah,
not
precisely,
before; it was
precisely.
after, as a result.
Yeah, after, and it's kind of amazing that she worked for them and in the first place. But people say, is this like a tiger finally showing its stripes, or is this a very cynical move on her part? And then another horrifying thing occurred to me. I said, well, is it possible that she was just offered a lot of money by some dark shadow money from Democratic activists who said, okay, look, we need to make the right wing look really, really bad too, and equally anti-Semitic as the left. Like, this is how cynical I am. Um,
That's that's
and
good.
she just simply
Sometimes you
said,
need to be,
yes,
but
okay, I will go on an unhinged anti-Semitic rant so that all of the government agencies that are chasing down these because like I don't think of the Ku Klux Klan as a threat. Do you? No, I think of Antifa, you know, and the rioters who basically set major metropolises on fire for 4 months. They're a lot more frightening to me, right? But we're still supposed to. I mean, what is it that Biden said? The KKK used to wear hoods, but then they took the hoods off and came out, because they knew that Trump would make it safe for them. So, you know, it almost seems too on the nose, right? That she would be working for Ben Shapiro and then suddenly come out as just like a utterly unhinged anti-Semite.
well,
But it
but
exists
David,
on both
that
sides. It
shows
exists on both sides.
that shows the problems that we can expect from the right, because
Yeah, precisely.
Ben Shapiro is also on the right, as many other Jews, like Reuben and on the right,
Yeah,
and out of them, including Tablet, uh, to the
yeah,
right
yeah.
of center, and out of
To the right of center. I mean, I think I don't want to speak for him, but I would say that Tablet kind of harkens back to what we would call a more libertarian stance, right? Or just more like to be an American.
I like Tablet a lot, so
It's a marvelous magazine.
yeah,
I'm
you
very,
can.
very privileged to write for them. I think that they really are looking back to like being an American means being a human being with inalienable rights.
That is a conception of America, but that's not the
Yeah,
conception that Kamala Harris has for America.
it is not. It's not.
This is the
It's
problem for me. This is the problem. And so Obama does not have that conception, although he long ago had sort of this conception as you describe, you know. But when I met him, in we met in the synagogue where he came during the elections, um, he was. I saw problems there already. And of course, when he was president of the United States with regard to Israel, with regard to Iran, and then
mm,
drawing these red lines and not doing anything, letting Russia move into Middle East, you know, That's his policies, horrible
Horrible policies.
policies. And now
Yeah.
Kamala Harris is coming, a nice, smiley, intelligent, very intelligent. You know, people call her stupid. I don't. I see
Mm,
her as very extremely intelligent, um, very smart politician, and she smiles,
yeah.
just to cover what she really thinks. But
Mm,
now her husband is a nominal Jew. She uses him, whichever way she wants to use, and he is playing by the rules. And everything is going. And what I see besides problems for the United States with these, what, government control of prices for bread and vegetables and fruits and things like this, and
oh, yes, yes.
and building many government subsidized
The
houses.
Yeah, as Hayek said, the road to serfdom, or as Elon Musk recently said, the road to bread lines and ugly shoes.
Absolutely.
That's what he said. He said,
But
this is the road to
that would be only half a problem, because besides bread lines, it means shortages, corruption,
yeah,
bribe giving and bribe taking, just horrible thing.
corruption, hunger, poverty. Only people who have lived under it, only people who have lived under it, um, understand it, and why these ideas continue to have traction, right? And this is part of the racial politics of the Kamala Harris wing are based on and I talk about this in the article. So when you have John Stuart Mill, you have equality, and equality is now I guess would be considered it's a classically liberal view if you're speaking in the parlance of um, political history. But now there's a lot of moderate conservatives who say I'm a classical liberal, I'm a John Stuart Mill liberal, and so he believes in universal equality. But what that means is equality before the law. So the law has to strenuously see you as neutral, right? You're all just about, and blind, Justitia has the blindfold on. And this is precisely so that it's not perfect, but everybody gets treated more or less equally, right? And then there came a sort of a academic shift, very much powered by the Frankfurt School, powered by Marxism, towards what's called equity. And equity says unless you have equality of outcomes, then you don't have equality of opportunity,
Mm.
right? And equality of outcomes is, well, uh, the road to bread lines and ugly shoes, right? This idea that everybody has to wind up with the exact same thing. And it's just not and also this idea that, and this is a very cherished.
Everybody other than those who take part in decision of deciding who should get what, when, and how.
Exactly. So the distribution class, they become the new oligarchs, right? They do, right? And anti-Semitism is very much a part of this. And Nathan Sharansky, who I'm sure you're very familiar with, writes about this in agonizing detail, right? Like his years as a dissident, where they're essentially jailing him for being a Jew, um, and the blandness, but also the evil of it, right? And what's happening now is this idea that we need large institutions to institute equity, because when John Stuart Mill said equality for everyone, that's just code for let's keep the white people in power, right? And what's maddening about this uh, type of thinking is that it's plausible. It is plausible. There is still a lot of systemic racism. I've personally witnessed cops be, outrageously violent towards racial minorities for no other reason than they were a racial minority. I've, heard incredible cases of injustice in sentencing. Um, it's very easy to conclude that the system is rigged, right, in one way or another, because human beings are imperfect, right? I think the leap that a lot of young idealistic people are not willing to make is this is the best of all possible broken systems. And there's this desire, you want the government to see you in all of your nuance and address all of your needs, whatever they happen to be, right? Whether, to see you in all of your racial diversity and all of your sexual diversity. Um, Me personally, my instincts are like, government, that's none of your business,
Absolutely.
right? Just let me pay my
I thought
taxes.
that that's what Martin Luther
protect me
King was.
protect me when people come over. Yeah, I don't need the government to love me, and all of it. That's for another human being to do, hopefully, and that in itself is an insurmountable kind of problem that uh, doesn't work out 90% of the time. So if it's hard for me to get my friends to understand it, but there is this idea, and the idea of equity is that, well, we have this underclass and they're never going to get ahead unless we artificially raise them up, right? And, which is, of course, results in what she's talking about, which is the wealth tax, right? And the wealth tax is never a wealth tax. It starts with the wealthy, right? And then all of the super wealthy leave, right? And then the wealth tax gets distributed to lower income people. If you have taxation over 50%, you drive all of the wealthy people out of your country, and then you just have violence, ultimately. Um, and disaster and bread lines and
I think that was one of the biggest, most important things that Trump did, reducing the corporate tax in order to
yeah,
bring the business from other countries back to the United States.
right.
But Kamala Harris, I guess, wants the other way. She wants to drive the business out of the United States. And I guess the means she's going to use to stop them from leaving the United States is taxing the transfers of capital abroad, transfer
Yep.
maybe even issuance of passports, American passports, all
Yeah.
kinds of other things, sort of like
Taxing unrealized gains. Taxing unrealized gains. So if you're a wealthy person and you've put aside money, you have extra money, and you're like, I'm going to put this in an index fund and I'm just going to let it grow, right? For the last 20 years. There's a lot of people that have done that. And that is designed like a wealthy person does that if they're smart. They do that in order for it to be their income when they get closer to retiring,
Mhm.
right? So for some people, especially in the upper income brackets, 70 to 80% of their income is unrealized gains. And Kamala Harris is just, through through her policy, whoever speaks for her, uh, they want to take half of that,
They
right?
may
That's
want to take
essentially what
even
they're
more.
saying.
In Sweden, before they changed their attitude, in early 80s,
Right.
the income tax was reaching more than 70%.
Yeah. It's
So,
ridiculous.
and in the United States, the problem, Americans are not Swedes. Americans have a lot of guns. Americans is multicultural society. Such things may lead to actually second civil war that is going to be
Mm.
really destructive.
Super, super, super destructive and very, very ill-informed, right? I mean, the similar, and what's interesting is, everybody always votes with their dollars, right? So I think that England at some point, Britain instituted a similar, like a 70% taxation rate sometime in the 70s. And, the Beatles, who are, famous sort of avatars of leftism and some aspects, libertarianism and others, they left. They came to America, right? Because they don't want their wealth taken away. So that's another unfortunate part of it. But I mean, it's all tied together. The idea of equity, right? We need to have these tax dollars so that we can level the playing field, right? And it is a redistributive. It's a redistributive scheme. However they want to market it, and it's based very much on this kind of racial theory that race is indelible, it's essential, it's traumatic. Only people of color get to speak about it, right? And you had this tendency that's been going on, and you have like racial sensitivity trainings that happen all the time at the corporate level, where people say, "We're going to tell you our story, and you're going to shut up,"
Hmm.
right? Um, which is fine. I mean, as a multiracial person, there are many aspects of my past experience and day-to-day experience that white people are oblivious to. Absolutely. Right. But then there are many aspects, I'm sure, and indignities of white experience that I'm not privy to. There are indignities of experience for every individual. And so, it gets really murky when you start to say, well, the grievances of this particular group, we really need to address those. These people, not so much. Right. Assumptions of privilege. I mean, it's a step too far. And I
Step
think
too
it
far
leads.
and in the wrong direction. I mean,
Yeah,
I have to say, I see America as the best country in the world.
of
In
course.
terms of right,
Yeah.
in terms of opportunities, in terms of culture. Uh,
Mm.
it's a fantastic country, and but I guess for some people it's not satisfying. They want something out of it. For example, that Black Lives Matter, one of the leaders, or there's several leaders, who was sitting and talking at Harvard University, saying that the
Mm.
existence of Israel is death for American blacks.
Yeah, you have a lot of these very
I forgot her
bizarre.
name. I forgot her name. But then I found somewhere that she bought herself multi-million dollar house. I guess she was not making enough as one of the leaders of Black Lives Matters.
Right. I mean, there's a fundraising aspect to it. There's a money aspect to it. Right. Um,
What I'm saying is this: I do not know which way America is going to go. I mean, maybe you do
no.
know, but I don't know. But one of the things about your article that attracted my attention was precisely, talking about the personalities. We're going to put a link to this article right next under the video of our conversation on YouTube.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
And I strongly advise people to read your article, because your article has information and is written very, very well, at least as far as I'm concerned. And
Thank you. Thank
uh,
you.
what was interesting for me, you touched there on Obama, but you touched on Kamala Harris, and on the nature of the Democratic Party and the nature of American society. In American society, yes, America is getting browning. A process of
Mm.
browning of America is taking place. It has been taking place now for maybe what, 40, 50 years or something like this. Um,
I would say from the beginning, but
well,
uh,
in the beginning, it was not Browning. In the beginning, it was more like uh, chessboard. Here's black, here's white.
but perhaps, I'm a musician, and one of the things that and I'm drawn to multiracial cultures. So of course, one of the things that I absolutely love is New Orleans, and jazz, and also zydeco, all of those hybrid. And I'm always used to being like the odd story in the room, right? People are like, "Oh, so you're half Japanese, but you're half Dutch, but your parents met in Kentucky. Wow, right?" So I went down to New Orleans, and I was playing some piano around town. I ran into another musician. He said, "I need to take you to the coal cellar," right? So the coal cellar is in Treme. So that's a very working class blue collar neighborhood in New Orleans, and it used to be an actual coal cellar, but now it's a bar. So I'm there, and there is a gentleman who appeared to me to be a light skinned black man. And he said, so you look interesting, what are you? And I said, I'm half Japanese and I'm half Dutch. And then he like turns to me, he goes, so what am I? Right. And as it turns out, he is an octoroon. This is an actual New Orleans term for 8 different ethnicities, which includes Native Americans, because there's Native Americans in the Louisiana area, Cuban, Jamaican, Chinese. He listed them all, right? And that's when I realized, I mean, especially in places, Brazil is the same, right? And unfortunately, tragically, it happens, of course, where there is, a huge amount of slave trade, and from the 15th century onwards. There's this incredible mixing, right? And I think a lot of what Kamala, this new leftward turn of the Democratic Party, is the turn from the idea of a melting pot, the idea of, okay, we're all just going to get thrown together, right? Melting pot turning into more of a mosaic idea, right? Which is an idea very self-consciously adopted by Canadians. And you'll see that the experience of ethnicity in Canada is much different, right? You get this idea of like, it's a lot more balkanized, right? And yeah, it's this notion of, no, we can't all come together under the banner of being American, because America stands for, oppression, slavery, this, we can't overcome the sins of our past and be proud of being
That's
American.
what America stands for: oppression and slavery.
According to,
If America
certain,
stands for oppression and slavery, then what all other countries stand for?
I'm not saying that I'm not saying that it's a logical viewpoint, but I mean, I imagine that if you're in the academy, if your leanings are, towards Marxist critical theory, and you spend a lot of time, I mean, the crimes of slavery are unimaginable, right? I mean,
But
and
slavery was a common state of being throughout the world
throughout the world, yes.
for
And
hundreds and thousands of years.
hundreds of thousands of years, it has always existed, and we put a stop to it, right? So, um,
Put a stop to it at a certain point. I mean, I
yeah,
have to say that I see this thing from, in some way, Marxist point of view. You know, before there was slavery, there were just primitive societies with one
hmm,
tribe, one house, one bunch of people
tribalism, yeah.
killing others just to get their land and things like this. Only when they started found a way to make more than one person can eat and use, they start enslaving their opponents rather than killing them. So in that respect, as far as I'm concerned, slavery at
Hmm.
a certain point was progress of humanity.
That that's reasonable, right? There's the story. There's that New York painter Tobias Schneebaum, who felt that he was a successful painter. He was actually living with Henry Miller, of all people, in the 40s, and he was openly gay, but he just felt like he was still oppressed. And then he learned about this tribe that lived out in the Brazilian Amazon, and he thought it would be so and he learned from anthropologists that they didn't really make that much of a distinction between homosexuality and heterosexuality. So he got a MacArthur Genius Grant, and he went down to the Amazon, and the only instructions he gave him were keep the river on your right. So he did, and he walked for something like 8 days, and he met them, and they brought him into the tribe, and they gave him his feathers and his tattoos, and he hung out with them, and it was idyllic, and he filled his notebooks with beautiful illustrations until one night they started singing this very bone-chilling song, and then the next morning they went to a neighboring tribe, slaughtered everyone in the village, and then somebody handed him a human foot, and very very eagerly wanted him to participate in this like warlike cannibalistic ritual, and he was utterly horrified, and it haunted him for the rest of his life. He wrote a book about it. It's a good documentary too, but it
But
shows you this journey.
he was lucky enough to have an opportunity to remember that.
Yeah, but it shows you, like we get these idyllic ideas about what Paleolithic culture may have been like, what Stone Age culture would be like, and there are these moments of rude awakening where human beings were animals. I mean, I also believe that for myself or for anybody else, I think under the right circumstances, I too would become a savage. You know, if there were a
David,
lockdown on New York City,
today with thousands and thousands of nuclear bombs all over the world, we're on the brink of being savage or are savages today. We just don't
yeah, you
recognize
know,
it that way.
we don't. But bringing this back to, I just think that there are misguided, profoundly leftist ideas that have wound their way into the democratic machine, and there is a belief that equity is the only way to overcome racial trauma. Right? I think that
I'm
that's
sorry,
sort of a
equity, equity by
equity is the only way to overcome racial trauma. It's a form of reparations, right? Like if you're not going to
massive
go
government
100%,
interference.
massive government interference is the only thing that is going to erase uh, racial trauma.
I guess some people will benefit from it, but the society as the whole and the world is going to suffer, as far as I'm concerned.
If they're able to implement it, but I don't think they'll be able to, right?
Well, that is
I
part
think
of the
it'll be a
problem
stalemate.
because there's going to be conflict, social conflict on major scale.
It, if you really want my full cynical kind of prediction for
I
this
do,
election
I
cycle,
do, I do, I do.
I don't think we're going to have. I don't think that a president is going to be decided in any clean sort of way. I think it's going to be a very very uncertain, traumatic election. I think that both sides are going to be unwilling to concede. I think we're going to go through some strange kind of unprecedented stalemate. And I think ultimately the Supreme Court are going to decide. And if the Supreme Court does decide and say, okay, it's Trump or okay, it's Kamala, 50% of the country is going to be unhappy. Right. If they say, well, it's Trump, he won the Electoral College, then all of the leftists are going to say, well, obviously they elected him. It's his Supreme Court. Right. And if they elect Kamala, I just see more divisiveness. I don't really see any resolution, unfortunately, because that's what I would like to see, obviously. Um, we peace and prosperity, good. War, division, and chaos, bad. Right?
David, this is a horrible, horrible prospect for this country, and
Yeah.
unfortunately, I have to agree with you. I feel the same way.
Hmm.
Anyway, uh, nice having you for conversation. And as I said, we're going to put your article. By the way, I've seen a number of your other articles written for different publications, and I like
Mhm.
all of them.
Thank
Uh,
you very much. Thank you.
and hopefully we'll speak again if you don't mind in the future. But meanwhile, I have to say the very best, and until next time,
Until next time, thank you so much.
thank you. Bye.
Okay.